The fluorescent lights of the Sterling Financial Group's 42nd floor cast harsh shadows across the polished marble floors as Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart through the executive corridor. The October wind rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan skyscraper, and the city lights below twinkled like scattered diamonds against the dark canvas of night. At 11:47 p.m., the building was nearly empty except for the security guards and the cleaning crew. Maria adjusted her navy blue uniform and checked her watch. She had 43 minutes left on her shift, and she still needed to clean 3 more offices, including the corner office that belonged to Jonathan Sterling himself, the 38-year-old CEO whose face graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune magazines. She had been working for Spotless Solutions Cleaning Company for 8 months now, ever since her savings ran out and student loan payments became unbearable. The irony wasn't lost on her. A summa cum laude mathematics graduate from Columbia University, now emptying trash cans and vacuuming carpets, in the same financial district where she had once dreamed of working as a quantitative analyst. The pay was decent enough to cover her rent in a tiny studio apartment in Queens and keep food on her table, but it wasn't what she had envisioned when she walked across that graduation stage 2 years ago. The job market had been brutal for someone without connections, and her thick accent and working-class background hadn't helped during interviews at prestigious firms. Maria's mother, Rosa, called every Sunday from their small apartment in El Paso, Texas, always asking the same question. "Mija, when are you going to use that expensive education?" Maria never had the heart to tell her mother that she was using her PhD-level knowledge primarily to calculate the most efficient cleaning routes through office buildings. As she approached Sterling's office, Maria noticed that the door was slightly ajar and the lights were still on. This was unusual. Most executives left by 7 p.m., and it was nearly midnight. She knocked gently on the doorframe. "Mr. Sterling, sir?" No response came from within. After waiting a moment, Maria carefully pushed the door open and peered inside. The office was empty, but clearly someone had been working late. Papers were scattered across the massive mahogany desk, coffee cups sat abandoned, and 3 large whiteboards mounted on the wall were covered with complex mathematical equations and diagrams. Maria had learned to be invisible during her months of night cleaning, to move efficiently through spaces without disturbing anything important, to clean around documents without reading them, to respect the privacy of the executives whose offices she maintained. But as she began dusting the desk, her eyes inevitably wandered to the whiteboards. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The leftmost board contained partial differential equations related to stochastic processes, the mathematical foundation of financial modeling. The middle board showed what appeared to be an attempt at deriving a new formula for high-frequency trading algorithms, but it was the rightmost board that captured her complete attention. Someone had been working on a variation of the Black-Scholes model, attempting to incorporate real-time market sentiment analysis with traditional option pricing. The mathematics were sophisticated, clearly the work of someone with advanced training, but there were several critical errors in the derivation. More intriguingly, the equation was incomplete. Whoever had been working on it had gotten stuck at a crucial integration step. Maria found herself staring at the board, her cleaning cloth forgotten in her hand. She could see exactly where the mathematician had gone wrong, and more importantly, she could see the path forward. The solution required a substitution that most people would miss, a technique she had learned during her graduate research on applied mathematics in financial markets. She glanced toward the door, listening for footsteps in the hallway. The building was quiet, except for the distant hum of the ventilation system. She knew she should finish cleaning and move on to the next office, but the incomplete equation called to her like an unfinished puzzle. Before she could stop herself, Maria set down her cleaning supplies and approached the whiteboard. She picked up a blue marker from the tray and began working through the problem in her head. The solution was elegant. It required recognizing that the stochastic term could be decomposed using a modified Ito's lemma, followed by a clever change of variables. Working quickly but carefully, Maria began writing. Her handwriting was neat and precise, a habit developed during years of academic work where clarity was essential. She completed the integration, simplified the resulting expression, and derived the final form of the equation. The entire process took her less than 15 minutes. She stepped back and examined her work. The completed equation was beautiful in its simplicity, a formula that could potentially revolutionize how options were priced in volatile markets by incorporating real-time sentiment data. If implemented correctly, it could give traders a significant advantage in predicting market movements. The reality of what she had just done suddenly hit her. She had written on the CEO's whiteboard. She had interfered with work that was clearly confidential and important. Panic began to set in as she realized the potential consequences of her actions. Maria quickly capped the marker and returned it to the tray. She grabbed her cleaning supplies and began dusting the desk with trembling hands, trying to convince herself that maybe no one would notice the addition to the whiteboard. After all, the writing was neat and professional. Perhaps whoever had been working on the problem would assume a colleague had completed it. But even as she tried to rationalize her actions, Maria knew she had crossed a line. The equation she had solved wasn't just any mathematical problem, it was clearly proprietary research worth potentially millions of dollars. She had revealed her capabilities in the most inappropriate way possible, essentially confessing to understanding work that was far above her supposed station as a cleaning lady. As she finished dusting and began vacuuming the office, Maria's mind raced with possibilities and fears. What would happen when they discovered what she had done? Would she be fired immediately? Could she face legal consequences for interfering with confidential research? Or worse, would they assume she had tried to steal intellectual property? The vacuum cleaner's motor seemed louder than usual in the quiet office, drowning out her racing thoughts. She worked mechanically, her eyes occasionally drifting back to the whiteboard, where her solution stood out clearly in blue ink against the black background. By the time she finished cleaning Sterling's office, it was past midnight. Maria packed up her supplies and headed toward the elevator, her shift finally complete. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, she stared at her reflection in the polished steel doors. The woman looking back at her wore a cleaning uniform and looked tired, but behind her eyes was the spark of someone who had just solved a problem that had stumped a team of highly paid financial engineers. Walking through the lobby and past the security desk, Maria nodded to Carlos, the night guard who had become friendly over the months. "Good night, Carlos. See you tomorrow." "Night, Maria. Drive safe out there." As she stepped out into the cold October air and walked toward the subway station, Maria pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The streets of Lower Manhattan were nearly empty, except for occasional taxis and late-night pedestrians. The city that never slept was taking one of its brief naps. On the subway ride back to Queens, Maria stared out the window at the tunnel walls rushing by, her mind still processing what had happened. She had spent months feeling invisible, moving through the corporate world as just another service worker. But tonight, for 15 minutes, she had been a mathematician again. She had solved a problem that mattered, created something valuable, made her mark on work that could change how financial markets operated. The question now was whether anyone would notice, and if they did, what would happen next? As the train pulled into her station, Maria gathered her things and prepared to walk the 6 blocks to her apartment. Tomorrow night, she would return to Sterling Financial Group for another shift, pushing her cart through the same corridors, cleaning the same offices. But something fundamental had changed. She had reminded herself, and potentially others, that genius doesn't always wear a suit and tie. The completed equation on Jonathan Sterling's whiteboard would be waiting for discovery, a mathematical testament to the fact that brilliance can emerge from the most unexpected places, even from someone whose job description includes emptying trash cans and mopping floors. Jonathan Sterling arrived at his office at 6:30 a.m. sharp, just as he had every morning for the past 3 years since becoming CEO of Sterling Financial Group. The October sunrise painted the Manhattan skyline in shades of gold and amber, and from his 42nd floor corner office, the city looked like a kingdom he was meant to rule. At 38, he had built his reputation on being meticulous, demanding, and always 3 steps ahead of his competitors. He set his espresso down on the mahogany desk and immediately noticed something was different. The office was immaculate, more so than usual. His papers were neatly arranged, the coffee cups from the previous night had been cleared away, and even the books on his shelves appeared to have been dusted and realigned. The cleaning crew had clearly been thorough, but it was the whiteboard that made him stop mid-sip. The equation he and his team had been struggling with for 3 weeks was now complete. Where he had left off in frustration the night before, someone had added a series of elegant mathematical steps in neat blue handwriting, culminating in a final formula that looked almost too simple to be correct. Jonathan set down his espresso and approached the board, studying the new work carefully. The handwriting was precise and confident, clearly the work of someone with serious mathematical training. The solution employed a substitution technique he hadn't considered, using a modified version of Ito's lemma that transformed the seemingly intractable integral into something manageable. His first instinct was to assume that Dr. Rachel Martinez, his head of quantitative analysis, had come in early to finish the work. But Rachel's handwriting was recognizable, messier, with a tendency to use Greek letters where this person had used clear English notation. This wasn't Rachel's work. Jonathan pulled out his phone and called her directly. "Rachel, it's Jonathan. Did you come in last night to finish the sentiment analysis integration?" Dr. Martinez's voice was groggy with sleep. "What? No, Jonathan, I went home at 8. I was planning to tackle it again this morning." "Why?" "Someone completed it. The entire derivation is on my whiteboard." There was a pause. "That's impossible. We've had our best people looking at that problem for weeks." "Are you sure it's correct?" Jonathan was already moving toward his computer, pulling up MATLAB to test the solution. "I'm checking now. But Rachel, if this is right," he trailed off as he began inputting the equation into his modeling software. "If it's right, we're looking at a potential game changer for high-frequency trading," Rachel finished. "Who else has access to your office?" "That's what I need to find out. Can you come in early? I want you to verify this before we jump to any conclusions. Give me 45 minutes. Jonathan hung up and continued working through the mathematics. As he progressed through each step of the solution, his excitement grew. The work was not just correct, it was brilliant. The person who had solved this understood advanced stochastic calculus at a level that suggested either a PhD in mathematics or years of experience in quantitative finance. By the time Rachel arrived at 7:30 a.m., Jonathan had run preliminary tests on the equation, and the results were extraordinary. The new formula showed a 23% improvement in prediction accuracy over their current models when tested against historical market data. Rachel burst into the office, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled from rushing. "Show me everything." For the next hour, they worked together, checking and double-checking the mathematics. Rachel ran additional simulations while Jonathan worked through the theoretical implications. Every test confirmed what they had hoped. The solution was not just correct, but represented a significant breakthrough. "This is PhD-level work," Rachel said, staring at the whiteboard. "Whoever did this has serious academic credentials. The technique they used for the stochastic term decomposition is something you'd typically see in advanced graduate research. Which brings us back to the question, who has access to my office after hours?" Jonathan reached for his phone again. "I need to talk to building security." 20 minutes later, Marcus Thompson, the head of building security, was reviewing access logs on his tablet in Jonathan's office. A former NYPD detective, Marcus took security seriously and maintained detailed records of everyone who entered and exited the executive floors. "The cleaning crew was here last night from 11 p.m. to 12:30 a.m., Marcus reported, scrolling through the data. "Standard schedule. The team lead was Sophia Reyes, and she had 2 other cleaners with her, Maria Santos and David Kim. They've all been cleared through our background checks and have been working this building for months. I need to know who specifically cleaned my office," Jonathan said. Marcus made a call to Sophia, the cleaning supervisor. After a brief conversation in Spanish, he hung up and turned back to Jonathan. "Maria Santos cleaned your office last night. Sophia says she's one of their best workers. Very thorough, very professional, never had any complaints." Rachel looked skeptical. "A cleaning lady solved a problem that stumped our entire quantitative analysis team." "I know how it sounds," Jonathan said, studying the handwriting on the whiteboard again. "But someone did this, and according to security, she was the only person in my office after I left." "There has to be another explanation," Rachel insisted. "Maybe someone else came in earlier this morning before you arrived." Marcus checked his logs again. "No one entered this floor before Mr. Sterling arrived at 6:30 a.m. The logs are definitive." Jonathan walked to his desk and pulled up the building's personnel database. "Maria Santos," he muttered, typing in the name. A basic profile appeared, employed by Spotless Solutions for 8 months. References from previous employers, clean background check. But there was no educational information, no indication of any mathematical training. "I need to talk to her," Jonathan said. "Talk to a cleaning lady about advanced mathematics." Rachel's tone was incredulous. "Jonathan, this is a multi-million-dollar algorithm we're discussing. We can't just—" "Rachel, look at this work," Jonathan interrupted, gesturing toward the whiteboard. "This isn't some lucky guess. This person understood not just the mathematics but the financial applications. They knew exactly what we were trying to achieve." The phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Jonathan's assistant, Patricia, was calling from her desk outside his office. "Mr. Sterling, Dr. Hamilton from MIT is on line 1. He's calling about the consulting position you discussed." "Tell him I'll call back," Jonathan said, his mind racing with possibilities. "Patricia, I need you to contact Spotless Solutions. Get me the employment file for Maria Santos, anything they have on her background." As Patricia went to make the calls, Rachel continued to stare at the whiteboard, her skepticism warring with the undeniable evidence before her. Even if this cleaning lady somehow has advanced mathematical training, why would she risk her job by writing on your whiteboard? "Maybe she couldn't help herself," Jonathan said quietly. "Maybe when you see a problem you can solve, especially one this elegant, you just have to solve it." The phone rang again. This time it was Patricia with information from the cleaning company. "Sir, Spotless Solutions says they don't typically collect detailed educational backgrounds for their cleaning staff, just work history and references. But the manager mentioned that Maria Santos is very bright. She sometimes helps other employees with paperwork and has picked up English remarkably quickly. She's originally from El Paso, Texas." Jonathan felt pieces of the puzzle starting to come together, but he was still missing something crucial. "Patricia, I need you to schedule a meeting with Maria Santos. Tell Spotless Solutions it's regarding her performance, nothing more specific." "You're really going to confront her?" Rachel asked after Patricia had gone to make the arrangements. "I'm going to talk to her." "There's a difference." Jonathan turned back to the whiteboard, studying the elegant mathematics once more. "Rachel, what if we're looking at this all wrong? What if instead of seeing this as a problem, we see it as an opportunity?" "An opportunity for what?" "Think about it. We've been trying to hire top-tier quantitative analysts for months. The market is competitive, salaries are astronomical, and most of the really brilliant people are already locked into golden handcuffs at other firms. But what if the most brilliant person we need has been cleaning our offices for the past 8 months? Rachel stared at him as if he'd suggested they hire a circus performer. "You're talking about promoting a cleaning lady to our quantitative analysis team based on one equation." "I'm talking about recognizing talent wherever we find it," Jonathan replied. "If Maria Santos can solve problems that have stumped our team, then maybe we should find out what else she's capable of." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, I've arranged for Maria Santos to come in this afternoon at 2 p.m. The cleaning company was a bit surprised by the request, but they're sending her over." Jonathan checked his watch. It was 9:15 a.m., which gave him less than 5 hours to figure out exactly what he was going to say to a cleaning lady who might just be the most gifted mathematician he'd ever encountered. "This is either going to be the best decision I've ever made," he said to Rachel, "or the most embarrassing conversation of my career." Little did he know it would turn out to be both. Maria's hands trembled as she stood outside the imposing glass doors of Sterling Financial Group at 1:55 p.m. She had barely slept after her shift, tossing and turning in her small Queen's apartment, replaying the moment she had picked up that blue marker over and over again. When Sophia called her that morning, saying that the building management wanted to speak with her about her performance, Maria's stomach had dropped like a stone. She knew this was about the equation. It had to be. The security guard, Carlos, looked surprised to see her during daylight hours. "Maria, what are you doing here during the day?" "I have a meeting," she said quietly, adjusting the collar of her only professional outfit, a navy blazer and matching skirt she had worn to job interviews 2 years ago. The fabric was slightly faded now, but it was the best she had. Carlos checked his list and handed her a visitor's badge. 42nd floor, Mr. Sterling's office, good luck." As the elevator climbed, Maria's reflection stared back at her from the polished walls. She looked different in daylight, more vulnerable somehow. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she had applied makeup carefully, trying to look professional despite the fear gnawing at her stomach. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 42nd floor, and Maria stepped out into the familiar executive corridor. But everything looked different in daylight. The marble floors gleamed under natural sunlight, streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the space buzzed with the quiet energy of important business being conducted behind closed doors. Patricia, Mr. Sterling's assistant, looked up from her desk with a polite but curious smile. She was an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes behind designer glasses. "You must be Maria Santos. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Can I offer you some water or coffee?" "Water, please," Maria said, her mouth suddenly dry. Patricia led her to the door of the corner office, the same door Maria had cleaned around hundreds of times, but never entered during business hours. Patricia knocked gently and opened the door. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Santos is here." Jonathan Sterling looked up from his desk, and Maria felt her breath catch. She had seen him in photographs, of course, but in person, he was more imposing than she had expected. He was tall, probably in his late 30s, with dark hair that was slightly grey at the temples and intelligent green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Maria made in 3 months. "Ms. Santos, please come in." "Thank you, Patricia." Maria walked into the office on unsteady legs, hyper-aware of every sound her footsteps made on the marble floor. The office looked completely different, filled with afternoon sunlight. The mahogany desk gleamed, the leather chairs looked supple and expensive, and the view of Manhattan was breathtaking. But it was the whiteboard that drew her attention immediately. The equation was still there, her handwriting in blue marker, standing out clearly against the black surface. Jonathan followed her gaze and saw her staring at it. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. Maria sat carefully, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She waited for him to speak, not trusting her voice. Jonathan studied her for a long moment, and Maria felt as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, he spoke. "Mrs. Santos, how long have you been working for Spotless Solutions?" 8 months, sir." Her voice came out steadier than she had expected. "And you clean this office regularly?" "Yes, sir. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night." "Have you noticed the whiteboards before? The work we do up there?" Maria's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I try not to look at private work, sir. I just clean around it." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Santos, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I'd appreciate a direct answer. Did you write on my whiteboard last night?" The moment of truth had arrived. Maria could lie, deny everything, claim she had never touched the board. But looking into Jonathan Sterling's intelligent eyes, she realized that lying would be pointless. He already knew. "Yes, sir, I did." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why?" Maria looked down at her hands. I couldn't help myself. I saw the equation and I could see where it was incomplete. I knew how to finish it. I shouldn't have touched it. I know I crossed a line and I'm sorry. I understand if you need to fire me." "Fire you?" Jonathan's voice held a note of surprise. "Mrs. Santos, look at me." Reluctantly, Maria raised her eyes to meet his. "That equation has had my entire quantitative analysis team stumped for 3 weeks. We have 5 PhDs working on it, including one of the most respected financial mathematicians from MIT. How did you solve it?" Maria felt her cheeks burning. I recognized the pattern. The stochastic term needed to be decomposed using a modified Ito's lemma. Once you make that substitution and change the variables, the integration becomes straightforward." Jonathan stared at her for a long moment. "Straightforward," he repeated slowly. "Miss Santos, where did you learn mathematics?" "Columbia University," she said quietly. "I have a PhD in applied mathematics with a focus on financial modeling." The silence that followed was deafening. Maria watched as Jonathan's expression shifted from confusion to astonishment to something that might have been respect. "You have a PhD from Columbia and you're working as a night cleaner." The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Maria felt all her buried frustrations and disappointments rising to the surface. "The job market is difficult, Mr. Sterling, especially when you don't have connections or come from the right background. I sent out over 200 applications after graduation. I had maybe a dozen interviews. Most firms want people who look and sound a certain way, who went to the right prep schools, who summer in the Hamptons." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "My father worked construction, and my mother cleaned houses. I put myself through school with scholarships and student loans. Apparently that's not the kind of background that opens doors in this industry." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, absorbing what she had said. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "What was your dissertation on?" "Stochastic processes in high-frequency trading environments, specifically incorporating behavioral economics and market sentiment analysis into traditional pricing models." Maria paused. "Very similar to what you're working on." "Jesus," Jonathan muttered, running a hand through his hair. Ms. Santos, what I'm about to say might sound crazy. Crazier than a cleaning lady solving your equation?" The corner of Jonathan's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Fair point. Here's the thing, we need brilliant mathematicians. We've been trying to fill senior positions on our quantitative team for months. The market is incredibly competitive, and frankly, we've been looking in all the usual places. Poaching from Goldman, headhunting from academia, recruiting from tech companies." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "But maybe we've been looking in the wrong places." Maybe the person we need has been here all along, working the night shift, invisible to everyone who matters. He turned back to face her. I have a proposition for you. Maria's heart stopped. Sir, I want you to meet with Dr. Rachel Martinez, our head of quantitative analysis. I want her to test your knowledge, verify what you're capable of. If you're as good as I think you are, I want to offer you a position on our team. Maria stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. You want to hire me as a mathematician? I want to hire the person who solved a problem my entire team couldn't crack. The fact that I found her pushing a cleaning cart instead of sitting in a corner office just means I got lucky. Tears threatened at the corners of Maria's eyes, but she blinked them back. Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Say you'll meet with Rachel. Say you'll give us a chance to make this right. Maria thought of her mother's voice on the phone every Sunday, asking when she would use her education. She thought of her student loans, her tiny apartment, the looks of pity from former classmates who had gone on to prestigious positions while she mopped floors. She thought of the equation on the whiteboard and the 15 minutes the night before when she had felt like herself again. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll meet with her. Jonathan smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. Good. Patricia will set up a meeting for tomorrow morning. And Ms. Santos? Yes, sir. Wear whatever makes you feel confident. You've got nothing to prove to anyone anymore. As Maria left the office, her legs shaky with adrenaline and disbelief, she couldn't help but look back at the whiteboard one more time. The equation was still there, her handwriting a testament to the moment when her life began to change direction. Sometimes, she thought, genius really can emerge from the most unexpected places. 3 weeks later, Maria Santos sat in her new office on the 39th floor of Sterling Financial Group, reviewing market data on her dual monitor setup. The morning sun streamed through her window, casting warm light across the mahogany desk that was now hers. She still couldn't quite believe it was real. The meeting with Dr. Rachel Martinez had been intense, but transformative. Rachel had spent 3 hours testing Maria's knowledge, throwing increasingly complex problems at her, expecting her to falter. Instead, Maria had solved each one with a combination of academic rigor and intuitive insight that left Rachel speechless. By the end of the session, Rachel had become Maria's strongest advocate. Jonathan, Rachel had said after Maria left that day, we need to hire her immediately. She's not just brilliant, she thinks about problems in ways that our entire team has missed. She could revolutionize how we approach quantitative analysis. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Maria's first week had been a whirlwind of meetings, introductions, and onboarding sessions. She had struggled with imposter syndrome, wondering if she truly belonged in conference rooms with executives who casually discussed million-dollar trades over their morning coffee. But gradually her confidence had grown. Her colleagues, initially skeptical about the cleaning lady-turned-mathematician, quickly recognized her exceptional abilities. Her insights had already improved 3 different trading algorithms, and the sentiment analysis model she had completed on Jonathan's whiteboard was now generating significant profits for the firm. This morning was special, though. Maria was preparing for her first major presentation to the board of directors, a proposal for a new algorithmic trading system that could potentially increase the firm's profits by 30% annually. It was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about during those long nights of cleaning offices and wondering if her education would ever matter. A knock on her door interrupted her preparation. Jonathan Sterling entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need some caffeine before the big presentation, he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. Thank you, Maria said, accepting the coffee gratefully. I have to admit I'm nervous. You shouldn't be. The work is solid, your projections are conservative, and your mathematical modeling is flawless. The board will be impressed. Maria looked out her window at the Manhattan skyline. You know, 3 weeks ago I was looking at this same view while emptying trash cans. Sometimes I still can't believe this is happening. Jonathan sat down in the chair across from her desk, a gesture that still struck Maria as surreal. Just weeks ago, she would have been invisible to him, someone who cleaned around his important work without being acknowledged. Now they were colleagues, equals in their pursuit of mathematical excellence. I've been thinking about what you said during our first meeting, Jonathan said, about how the industry overlooks people who don't come from the right background. We missed out on your talents for 8 months because we weren't looking in the right places. It's not just your company, Maria replied. It's systematic across the entire financial industry. How many other brilliant people are out there, working jobs that don't utilize their abilities simply because they don't fit the expected profile? Jonathan leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. What if we changed that? What do you mean? I mean, what if Sterling Financial Group became known for finding talent in unconventional places? What if we actively recruited from community colleges, state universities, non-traditional backgrounds? What if we looked for ability rather than pedigree? Maria felt her heart rate quicken. That would be revolutionary, but it would also require changing hiring practices, interview processes, maybe even the corporate culture itself. Exactly. And I want you to help me figure out how to do it. Before Maria could respond, Patricia's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Sterling, Ms. Santos, the board is ready for you in the main conference room. Maria stood up, smoothing her navy blazer, a new one this time, properly tailored and professional. She had learned that looking the part was important, even when your mathematical abilities spoke for themselves. Ready? Jonathan asked. Ready, Maria replied, surprising herself with how confident she sounded. The boardroom was intimidating, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. 12 board members sat around a polished conference table, their faces expectant but skeptical. These were some of the most powerful people in finance, and Maria was about to propose that they invest tens of millions of dollars based on her algorithms. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan began, I'd like you to meet Dr. Maria Santos, our newest senior quantitative analyst. Maria has developed a revolutionary approach to algorithmic trading that I believe will transform our competitive position. Maria stepped forward, her presentation materials ready. As she began speaking, her nervousness melted away, replaced by the passion she felt for her work. She explained the mathematical foundations of her approach, walked through the projected returns, and answered detailed questions about risk management and implementation costs. The questions were sharp and challenging, but Maria handled each one with expertise and poise. She could see the board members' expressions shifting from skepticism to interest to genuine excitement as they grasped the potential of her proposal. Dr. Santos, said Margaret Harrison, the board chairwoman, your projections show a 30% increase in annual returns. That seems optimistic for any new system. Mrs. Harrison, I understand the skepticism, but these projections are based on conservative estimates using historical market data. In our backtesting, the system actually performed better than these numbers suggest. I kept the projections conservative because I'd rather underpromise and over-deliver. Board member David Chen leaned forward. What's your confidence level in the risk management protocols? Maria smiled. Very high. The system incorporates multiple layers of risk assessment, including real-time market sentiment analysis, volatility forecasting, and automated circuit breakers. We've stress-tested it against every major market downturn of the past 20 years. For the next hour, Maria fielded questions with the expertise of someone who had lived and breathed this mathematics for years. She discussed implementation timelines, staffing requirements, and integration with existing systems. By the end of the presentation, the room was buzzing with excitement. Dr. Santos, Margaret Harrison said as Maria concluded, this is impressive work. The board will need to discuss the proposal, but I can tell you that initial reactions are very positive. As Maria and Jonathan left the boardroom, she felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The presentation had gone better than she had dared hope. How do you feel? Jonathan asked as they walked back toward the elevators. Like I just pitched the most important idea of my life to some of the most powerful people in finance, Maria replied. But also like I finally got to show what I'm capable of. That evening, as Maria rode the subway back to Queens, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Mija, how did the big presentation go today? Maria smiled as she typed back, It went well, Mama. I think I'm finally using that expensive education. 3 days later, the board approved Maria's proposal unanimously, along with a $50 million budget for implementation. But even more significantly, they also approved Jonathan's proposal to establish a new recruitment program specifically designed to identify and hire talent from non-traditional backgrounds. Maria was chosen to head the initiative. 6 months later, as Maria sat in her corner office, she had been promoted to Director of Quantitative Innovation. She looked out at the Manhattan skyline and thought about the night she had picked up that blue marker. That moment of impulse, of being unable to resist solving an elegant mathematical problem, had changed not just her life but potentially the lives of many others. The recruitment program had already identified and hired 12 exceptional candidates from community colleges, state universities, and even a former taxi driver who had taught himself advanced statistics. The financial press had taken notice, with articles praising Sterling Financial Group's innovative approach to talent acquisition. Maria's algorithm was generating even better returns than projected, and she had become a sought-after speaker at industry conferences, telling her story and advocating for more inclusive hiring practices across the financial sector. But perhaps most importantly, she had proven that brilliance could emerge from anywhere, that genius didn't require the right zip code, the right accent, or the right connections. Sometimes it just required someone willing to look beyond the uniform and see the person underneath. As she prepared to leave for the day, Maria walked past the 42nd floor and glanced into Jonathan's office. The whiteboard was covered with new equations now, but she could still see faint traces of blue ink from that first night, a permanent reminder of the moment when everything changed. Outside, the October evening was crisp and clear, just like it had been that night 3 weeks ago. But as Maria walked toward the subway station, she wasn't thinking about equations or algorithms or board presentations. She was thinking about calling her mother and telling her about the scholarship program Sterling Financial Group was establishing for first-generation college students pursuing mathematics degrees. She was thinking about the young woman who might someday clean offices while dreaming of bigger things, and how maybe now the path to those dreams would be a little clearer. Sometimes, Maria thought as she descended into the subway, the most important discoveries happen when you least expect them. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to pick up a marker and solve the equation that everyone else said was impossible.